but by that stage, like I've tweaked it so much, I don't have any normalization over what it should be, and I wasn't testing against any of the legendary weapons.
Okay, so there's something on a similar notion. So we're talking about market implications and stuff. So I think one of the recent changes that you made to the game with the most recent patch is the Sand Slay being nerfed. For those of you who didn't know, the Sand Slay is a legendary weapon, and it got changed recently because it was a little bit too overpowered. So it got changed a little bit to kind of tune for that. How do market implications of items and market prices affect your willingness to change items, if at all?
Well, I mean, it does impact it for items like that, which are very new. I need some sort of ability to make changes and adjustments, because as the game gets bigger and as effects get added, they tend to have unknown effects and combinations. Like it gets very difficult unless I'm using some sort of more automated system to see how every item will react with other items. For the Sand Slay stuff, I mean, that was on me when I did testing of that. It's really hard to do percentages. Everyone's like, you know, they don't understand the drop rates. Even the random percentages on weapons and stuff gets difficult because you play it and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, it doesn't feel like this is happening often enough. So I just kept increasing it. It was originally set at around 10%. And I just kept increasing. I went to 50. I'm like, yeah. Like by this stage, it's like being a frog in water. Like as you warm up the
Right.
water, eventually they'll die. It's like that. Like you just keep playing and you're testing and you're like, yeah, yeah, cool. Okay, it's feeling better and better and better. And like sitting at 50%. I'm like, yeah, this feels really good now. But by that stage, like I've tweaked it so much, I don't have any normalization over what it should be, and I wasn't testing against any of the legendary weapons. So where it was to other legendary weapons was like up here. And because I'm doing so many other things at the same time as well, I'm just like, yeah, okay, I need to get that out. I was under the time crunch of Christmas happening, and I'm just like, yeah, let's do it. So when it comes to actually going back to that, it's very difficult because people have paid money for certain items, and what I've asked people every time is to do some due diligence. If something seems insanely overpowered, insanely underpowered, something that's not normal to you, at least question it and ask about it first, because it's like hearing about something and going, oh yeah, quick, I'm going to jump on that, like the FOMO stuff. But in this case, because it's early access, you kind of got to have a little bit of understanding and realization that things might need to be tweaked or changed. It's like some of the very, very early items. Let's take the Harvester of Sorrow. Back then, there was no concept of different types of damage. There was very, very basic levels, and you would descend further down into different levels until eventually it was just impossible to play. So that item was made for that kind of thing because you would pick up random health pots and other things along the way as well in the dungeons, which would help you. But this kind of item came in quite handy. These days, it feels very overpowered. But because it's such an old item, I can't really just go back and change it because the price of that has been going up. People have been going, yeah, this is a really, really good item. You need to have it. And so I need to take that into account, what it's currently trading for, the current power, and whether it's going to really break something, as well as just the general perception and the total supply. So if there's a really powerful item and there's maybe 20 of them, probably doesn't really matter, even if it's slightly game breaking, because there's so few. But I don't know. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
People are like, no, you just don't change it. And I'm like, well, if I want to introduce this new thing now, because the game's kind of gone in a different direction, and you've I know you've paid money for it, and you have paid money for it. If you paid money for it because you thought it was an overpowered item, then
That
it's
kind of-
there needs to be some sort of an analytical analysis or something to it to say, Cliff, maybe this item is really overpowered, or when people buy it, they need to have some more checking with that to sort of query it. But I don't know, it's difficult.
It is
It's really
definitely
difficult.
complicated to
Yeah,
keep
you
things
can't
balanced.
just I can't just go and change it because you've paid money for it. There's value in it, and I potentially adjust the value. So when I do think about these things, I do try and take into account that sort of stuff. And there's items that are out there right now that are like heavily undervalued, and I'm just like, I know why the people aren't paying so much for that because there's no use. It will change in the future. And then there's other items that people have just speculated like crazy about. Like for example, the Stampede token. I mean, people are just like collecting it. I'm like, that's fine. You can make whatever you wanted out of it. Originally, I wanted to get that back in because I wanted to use it for something else. And I provided like 3 or 4 different avenues to get it in. And it's just like people are like, oh no, it's really good, it's really good, it's really good. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do with that right now. Like it's so high, I can't change it. I can't delete them or anything because then people will be like, oh, look, the ones I have are now more valuable. Yeah, I don't know. It's like it's a new space. It's
Yeah.
really difficult because you're mixing this limited stuff with games, and normally like collecting items, like you were talking about before, Tyrannosaur, with the collecting cards and whatever. If cards get destroyed, all it really does is to change the value of them because there's less of them, and if there's people that want them, they might be willing to pay more because they know there's less. Sometimes in those games they change the rules over time, and they may or may not exclude old cards and that kind of thing. But the rest of the game like doesn't really change too much around it, and so mixing all of that together and trying to make everything fair and balanced and whatnot is really challenging.